Today, I'm going to take the mystery out of sourdough bread making and show you how I do it. All the links that you need for today's video will be in the description box below. You just need to click show more. If you happen to be new here, welcome to my channel, Black Hills Living. My name is Michelle Tech. If you want to see more videos in the future about mountain living, gardening, cooking, outdoor adventures, and related content, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell. I make videos once a week, and I'd love to see you again. With that being said, let's get to making some sourdough bread. So today I'm going to show you how I make my sourdough bread. The starter has been fed this morning. I call her Violet, and I have 2 jars. The discard is named Mabel. I have my food scale, measuring spoons, a bowl scraper, a big bowl, a bamboo spoon, some parchment paper, uniodized sea salt, a little bit of cornmeal to dust the pan, a measuring cup just to put my water in, and 100% whole grain whole wheat flour, and unbleached all-purpose flour. The first thing I'm going to do is mix up the sourdough. I'm going to put my big bowl on the scale. I'm going to tare the scale so it says 0. And I'm working in ounces. There we go. Now I need 16 ounces of fed starter. So I'm going to use 8 ounces of each of these jars. So I'm basically spooning out 8 ounces from this jar. Perfect. And 8 ounces from this jar. For a total of 16 ounces exactly. I'm going to set my starter aside because I do need to feed that again. And it just so happens that what's left in those jars is exactly how much I need to start with to feed it. With my spoon in there, I'm going to tare it to 0. Now I'm going to add 21 1/4 ounces of all-purpose flour and 3 ounces of the whole wheat flour. So I'm going to tare the scale again, 3 ounces, and I'm just going to mix these 2 flours up a little bit on top of the starter here. Right, I'm going to tare the scale again, and I need some warm water, lukewarm water. I'm not going to measure from this cup, I'm just putting some water in here because we're actually going to weigh it. Now I need 14 ounces, oops, let me tare that again. I moved it. 14 ounces of lukewarm water. Now I don't need the scale for a couple minutes, but I'm going to mix this up until I have a cohesive dough. Notice I have not put the salt in yet. All right, now that it's all mixed together, I'm going to cover this with a piece of parchment paper and let it sit for 20 minutes. And I'm going to try to get all this dough off of this spoon because you can't put it down the sink or it will seize up your pipes. If you have any left, you're going to want to put it in the garbage. And that's the other thing about the starter or discard. You don't want to put it down the sink. You're going to have to use it in other recipes like cake or crackers. There's all kinds of recipes for discard, but do not put it down the sink. So we will cover this with parchment paper and let it rest for 20 minutes. Now, while the sourdough rests, I'm going to feed my starter. I'm going to tare the scale to show you that my jar that I've used the 8 ounces of starter out of now has 19.6 ounces left in a jar. I'm going to tare the scale again. I need to add 4 ounces of all-purpose flour to feed this starter. And I need to add 4 ounces of lukewarm water. Do the same thing with this jar. Now we need to mix each of these jars up. I got my initial starter from actually King Arthur flour, but I keep my starter in the fridge so that it slows down that ferment and I can use it just once a week. So I'm going to put the lids on. Violet, not super tight, but I've got it in 2 jars, so I know it's not going to blow up and overflow. That's why I've got it in 2 jars. So these are going to sit on the room temperature counter for 2.5 hours while I'm making the rest of the bread, and after that time they go in the fridge until next week. The dough has sat for 20 minutes, so now we need to add 2.5 teaspoons of uniodized sea salt. 2.5. With a wet hand, so that my hand doesn't stick, I'm going to work this salt into the sourdough. First I punch it down just to get it mixed throughout from top to bottom. And then I'm going to go around the sides and fold up the outer edge into the center and then push it down in. So I'm kind of kneading as we go here, and until the dough starts feeling smooth and pulls away from the edge of the bowl. All right, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to cover it with the parchment again and let it rest for 1 hour. The dough has been resting for 1 hour, so now it's time to envelope the dough. Scrape down the side and pull it towards me and lightly press it down. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so I'm getting the next side. Bringing it down towards the bottom, rotate it one more time, a third time, scrape down the side and get it folded over, and then the last time so that all 4 sides have been folded, scraping down and pulling forward and lightly pressing it down so it stays. Now I'm going to cover it again, let it rest for 1 more hour, and then it's time to put the freshly fed starter back in the fridge for next week. And just because I'm an engineer and I'm a geek, I have put this entire process that I have perfected that works for me into Alexa as a routine. So she tells me on mornings that I'm doing sourdough what the process is. I don't have to remember, I don't have to look at the quantities, I don't have to look at the times. She tells me exactly what to do throughout the day to get this done. The envelope dough has been resting for 1 hour. Now what we need to do is divide our dough into the amount of loaves we want. And I'm going to do 3. They're a little bit smaller. We're just going to dump this dough out onto a lightly floured surface. Scrape it out of the bowl. Just going to make sure it's not sticking, so I'm moving it around a little bit. And I'm just going to cut it. I'm not going to do any shaping yet. I'm just dividing it into my 3 pieces. And then I'm going to cover this and let this rest for 20 minutes. All right, now I'm going to cut 2 parchment paper shapes for my 2 pans. Zip off the excess. Just dust a little bit of cornmeal. Just a very small amount. Oop, too much. Over the parchment, and that keeps it from sticking to the parchment. I'm going to get this excess flour out of the way. I'm going to work with each loaf, and it's a little bit tacky on the top still, but it's got this flour on the bottom. What I want to do is shape this into a round. So I'm going to pull it towards myself, and until you get some of that flour worked off the bottom, it won't do this, but I'm cupping my hands at the top of the loaf, but pulling it towards myself, and that is stretching the ball into a nice, smooth, topped round. So I'm just going around a few times to make that a nice round loaf. And then you see it's kind of all tucked in on the bottom there. So I'll place this on one of the pans. Now these 3 loaves I'm going to cover with parchment and let them rest and rise for 2.5 hours. Now, what we need to do up to a half an hour before we want to put these in the oven is preheat the oven to 450 degrees with a cast iron pan on the bottom rack and the top rack for the bread. I'm also going to microwave 1.5 cups of water to boiling. And now I need to slash the loaves. And I'm using a curved blade lame. It's spelled L-A-M-E. Or you can use just a razor blade. You could even use kitchen scissors or just a knife. Kitchen scissors if you're just going to snip ears in. And this is to help the loaf expand in a controlled way instead of just bursting open in random places. I make these every week, so I don't get too fancy with them. Now, what I need to do is put the bread in the oven, and immediately after I'm putting that boiling water in the cast iron pan, which is underneath, I've got a heat glove on this hand because that steam will be hot. So I'm putting the bread here, and I'm having to overlap a little bit because my pans are wide, and then pulling this out just enough to be able to pour this steam in, or water in. Push it in quick and set the timer for 30 to 35 minutes. The timer just went off on the sourdough, so it's time to get it out of the oven and onto the cooling rack right away. Otherwise, baked items that end up cooling on a hot pan will get tough on the bottom crust. Loaf number 1. Two and 3. If you want to see bye.